Hi, welcome to a little bit of a tutorial on how to do case studies. I wanted to acknowledge that much of the material in this presentation comes from a book that you're not using in class called Strategic Marketing Problems by Karen and Peterson. Um, so this is not all my original work. Some of it has been adapted and changed, but the base material comes from these folks. Um, So we're going to be doing a number of case studies in this class, and it's really important to understand how to do a case study so that you can do it well and sort of learn from it. Because the idea of a case study is to put you into a situation um, and have you be the person in the situation. So you're put into a decision maker's shoes in a situation. You're given all of the information that that decision maker has, and then you're asked to make a decision. Um, so you'll be doing this individually to begin with, and then you'll be doing some case studies where you're working as a group. And the first thing you need to remember about case studies is, first of all, there's no right answer. And this, for many of you, may be difficult if you have coming from backgrounds in the sciences or in engineering or in mathematics. There's usually a right answer uh, that we can, I can look at as a professor and say, well, it's either right or it's wrong. But when we're talking about business decisions, there isn't necessarily a right answer. This is confusing to a lot of students, but it's reality. So when we make decisions, we make the best decision we can given the information that we have at the time we make the decision. Um, is the decision right or wrong? Well, we probably don't know until after we've made it and we see how things turn out. And were there other decisions that would have been better or worse to make, or just the same? Probably. We could have decided A, B, or C, and C might have been a terrible decision, but A and B were both pretty good decisions and not really a choice between them. Your decision is based on your interpretation of the information that you have. Now, that said, whatever decision you make, you have to defend it. So we'll talk about that. You have to be able to have the information available that backs up or informs your decision. So when you're given a case, cases are usually relatively short, but they're packed with information. They might be 15 pages long, something like that. So the best way to approach a case, at least in my experience, is to do a quick read through. Become familiar with what the case is about. Identify the problem that the decision maker is facing and try to get as much background information as you can by just reading without studying. So read the case from beginning to end. Um, don't try to analyze, don't try to do anything. Just read it and see if you can get a sense of what's going on and try to identify the problem, because that will help you the second time through. Once you know what the problem is, then you can read the information um, more carefully and understand how you might use it. Second time, this is when you want to, second reading, this is when you want to pay close attention to the facts and the assumptions made in the case. And when you read these cases, some of the information is relevant and important, and some of it may not be, just like in the real world. I've got all this information on my desk about making a decision. How much of it is relevant and how much of it is just fluff or unreliable information? And in cases that you're going to do with me, there's nobody's going to tell you which is the important stuff and which isn't. You have to figure out what the important stuff is and what isn't. And oftentimes you have information from two different sources that may be in conflict, so you have to decide which is the reliable source. So think about that. And this is really real world. This happens in the real world too. We never really 100% certain about our information. We need to figure out what's good and what's not good, and what's usable and what's not usable. Once you've read it the second time, try to organize the data or the detailed information in some manner, and this may be an outline format, it might be in an Excel spreadsheet. Try to organize it so that you understand it, so that you can use it. Absolutely, when you're reading a case, don't jump to conclusions. It's really easy when you first read a case, and just as it's easy in real life when you think you know, to jump to a conclusion. There's water in the bilge, we must be leaking. Is that a good conclusion? Maybe not. Maybe we're not leaking. Maybe there's some other reason for water in the bilge. So it might be a logical conclusion, but not necessarily. So what's going on here? Don't rush. Don't jump to a conclusion because you think you know the answer. Make sure you analyze all the information before you even let yourself see some conclusion. The reason for this is if you jump to a conclusion, the rest of your reading of the case will be biased by what you think the answer is. So you won't read things in an unbiased manner. You'll bias your understanding because you already think you know the answer. So everything, your mind will work in such a way as to justify the answer you already figured out. So if you can, stop yourself from reaching past conclusions. And don't start messing with the numbers, trying to analyze the numbers until you understand where they're coming from and what they mean. So don't try to start pushing spreadsheet numbers around if that's your inclination, if you're a numbers person. Don't try to use the numbers until you really understand what they're all about. And third, in most cases that you'll do with me, and this is true in real life too, supposition and fact are two different things. People have information, they have knowledge because they've done things for a long time, and therefore they think they know, but they may not know. So try to get away from somebody saying, well, when we do this, this happens, as opposed to a fact-based conclusion that X follows Y. So make sure you do that, because the idea of cases is to learn how to make decisions in the real world. So we're trying to create a real world feel and understanding when we do a case. So when you're creating a case analysis, you want to do these kinds of things. And there's 5 bullet points here. Not every case will utilize every bullet point. But understand what the industry is that you're looking at and how the industry works. Understand competitors if you can, and what their strengths and weaknesses are. Understand the consumer as much as you can from the information you're given, the why, where, when, and how of how consumers buy things. Understand how the market has been segmented, and can you quantify the segments given the information that you have? And what does it take to be successful in this particular industry? Those are good questions to answer, and ask and answer if you can, given the information you have. And you can't always answer all these questions because you may have holes in your information. So then understand the organization that you're looking at. What are their objectives and missions? What are they really good at? What's their core or distinctive competency? What are they offering to the market? What's the potential? What's the situation? What's the problem or the situation that I have to deal with right at the moment? What kind of resources do I have? What got us to this situation? And we talked about SWOTs earlier. What's the fit between it and its environment based on a SWOT? So SWOTs can be very useful in organizing this kind of information. Then when you've analyzed the case, now you have to decide what to do. What are the things that you can do? What are the possible decisions in this case? In almost every case, there's the decision of doing nothing. I'm not going to do anything here. I'm going to say no. That's almost always an option in almost every decision-making process. Don't make a decision. Don't do anything. That is a decision in and of itself, but doesn't require action per se. What other things can I do? I could do this, that, or the other thing. There's usually a bunch of options. And then if you can, do some kind of a cost-benefit analysis of those options to see if you can quantify the results that may result from doing any one of those actions, and that may be a qualitative or a quantitative result. Being an accountant, I like quantitative results, but I don't always get them. And are there conflicts, a disparity between what we want to do, what we should do, what we have the assets or capabilities of doing, and what we have to do? So see if you can figure that out. Finally, what might happen if we do what we think we want to do? What will happen with each course of action? We kind of covered that back here, cost and benefit. So this is kind of another way of stating cost and benefit. Whatever course of action we take, who's going to be satisfied by that decision and who won't, and that's also in the organization and outside the organization. How profitable might these things be? Is it going to have an effect on, will it have an effect on other things? Somehow things pause there for a second, I'm not sure why. Will it have an effect on what we do in the future? If we do this, does it preclude us doing something else in the future? So that's an important thing to look at. And and then finally you have to make a decision. What should we do? Remember, in case studies, that you only look at the information inside the case. You may know something about the industry that you're doing a case study on, but what you're given is what the manager that you're stepping into the manager's shoes, you have the same information that he or she has. So you want to make sure that you don't jump the gun and take information that you have, personal knowledge that you have, and insert it into the case. Many of the cases I'm going to give you are older. The world has changed since these cases were written, that these situations existed. So for instance, you may get a case that happens before there were smartphones. Well, don't assume that you could address and use smartphones to solve the problem in the case. So let's say an app, because apps didn't exist. So you've got to put yourself in the time and place of the manager in the case. That doesn't mean they're old-fashioned cases. It just means that you only know what the manager knows. So make sure you do, when you do a case, make sure you don't put your own knowledge on top of knowledge that's there. So once you've finished analyzing the case and come to a conclusion, you know what you're going to do. So when you're, let's see where we are. I got interrupted there, and I want to make sure that I'm in the right place. Sorry, I had a phone call. I don't think I am in the right place. Hold on a second. So when you're doing a written report, you have to make sure that everything is well organized and carefully grammatically correct, and that you have these three major sections. Identify the problem, analyze and evaluate the information given to you in the case, and then provide recommendations with supporting reasoning. So those three sections are your written report. It has to tell a story, has to be well written, has to be written in a professional language, which is easy to read and very concise. So that's how business reports should be written, and that's how I expect them to be written for this class. If you end up being assigned to a team to do a report, you won't be for your first case study, but later on you will. Make sure you use your team efficiently. Be committed to the task and be dependable, and don't think you can hide under a rock and let your team members do the work. I have a couple of methods. I can tell to a certain extent how you're doing based on my observation of what's going on. But in addition, we will do what I call peer evaluations, which means that you'll rate yourself and your team members as to how much effort they're putting into the case or the project. And if I give an A to the case, you might not get an A if you haven't been putting in a sufficient amount of efforts. If you've only put in 80% of the effort, you'll get a B minus. So remember that. Don't think you can hide under a rock. Groups are incredibly powerful. You get much better work from a group than you do from any individual, but you have to make sure that everybody pulls their weight. So that's important. If we end up with a class discussion, which would be a virtual discussion because this is an online class, make sure you enter the discussion with good notes, that you listen to other viewpoints, and that you contribute your own viewpoints during the discussion. And I may ask you to prepare a short summary after the discussion to describe what took place in the discussion. That would be written. If we required to do an oral presentation, you probably present it much like I'm presenting these lectures. So you'll do a video recording with probably PowerPoints as data. Make sure you rehearse before you present so that you present well and clearly. And remember that your PowerPoints don't replace what you're saying. So don't just read off the slides. Don't use too many graphics and colors, that sort of thing. Your slides should cover exactly what your report covers, though you're going to do it in a more concise manner because you can't, the report might, let's say, be 7 or 8 pages, and the slides probably limit you to 20 minutes or 15 minutes or something like that. So you've got to be very, very careful that you cover the high points in the presentation and you get into the depths and the weeds in your report. Make sure that these elements are present, so your names and the title, the outline, and then the 3 things that we talked about in the paper have to be in the slides. The issues, the problem statement, the supporting reasoning, and an analysis. The last few slides in this slide deck are not, I'm not going to talk to them at all. They are tips that I've gathered from a variety of different places for making effective PowerPoint presentations. And there's 3 big long slides, so don't despair. You can use them at your will. They're just there for your information. So thank you very much, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.